Hey traders, Raghee here. We're going to kick things off in this recap video with a look at sort of the push and pull in this market today, and one of them was certainly Xilinx. You know, as a futures trader, certain earnings are going to get your attention, and one of the things that we noticed was Xilinx. You know, definitely having a blowout earnings session. Why would a futures trader have to be interested in Xilinx? Well, it has to do with basically dominoes falling. Now, first of all, one of the questions that I had in the chat room into the close yesterday was, what would we do with Xilinx? And Xilinx is mostly green grab candles, the overall trend, pulling back into the wave. The only position to have with where Xilinx was in front of earnings would be a long position. Had we been up in here, that would have been a short, possibly, or what's known as a strip straddle. It's a lopsided straddle position with a bearish emphasis. Something to think about, one of my favorite ways to use options in situations where I know there's going to be a lot of volatility. So here goes Xilinx. Well, we have Intel earnings today, and Intel is definitely one of those narratives where Xilinx and Intel, one domino, a small domino like Xilinx, knocks into Intel. Well, now Intel becomes a much more interesting conversation, because if we see Intel start to move on the optimism around Xilinx, what is that going to do? Well, Xilinx and Intel are both part of an ETF called the SMH. A lot of you know the semiconductors. Now, semis are a great way that I like to play an ETF alongside the NASDAQ futures or even the QQQ NASDAQ 100 ETF. So the domino of Xilinx, which is much lower weighted within the SMH, knocks into the largest domino in the SMH, largest, heaviest weighted name, Intel, which has earnings today, and you start to see a lot of optimism about the SMH, about semiconductors. Now, I kind of jokingly say in the room that it is 100% against my religion, my trading religion, to buy markets at their highs. If you've got a bullish narrative, you know, everybody was bullish semis today, right? If you've got a true bullish narrative and a real trade and a real breakdown of what it is you like about this market, it should have been valid long before the Xilinx earnings. It should have been valid in the days before. It should have been valid on a down day. It should have been valid down at lows, right? The justification for being long for most people is the market's going higher. That can't be it, especially if it's a major move, because what ends up happening is if you're buying into the momentum bullishly, especially if you're buying options, you're going to get steamrolled, because unless the market continues higher, you're in big trouble. Okay, so then now we get on over to after the bell, looking at what it is that Intel is ultimately going to do. Now, remember, if the market is already anticipating good news, then it's a much taller order for any heavily weighted stock to basically keep the market's good mood going. It's a much taller order. It's a much more difficult thing to do. In other words, not only does the market have to beat, it has to beat higher expectations. So let's take a look at Intel. And Intel is the number 7 weighted name within the NASDAQ. So let's think about the NASDAQ and Intel together. Let's look at it this way, because I don't want to stray too far from the futures market. But remember, we are trading stocks when we're trading futures. So you look at Intel, and I'm going to turn these both into the daily time frame. You look at Intel's weighting within the SMH. You look at Intel within the context of the NASDAQ. Intel is actually a choppy market. And one of the things that I mentioned to everyone asking, well, Rog, should we get long Intel in front of earnings? And I said, well, not really, because if you think about what Intel's doing, your window for getting long was back down in here, not here. This is a big no-no. That is what we call a bozo no-no, to be long up there, or within the context of this market already moving higher. Your long was back in here, your long was back in here, your long was back in here, on the market pulling back, because if you have a bullish thesis on Intel, your bullish thesis should not require the market punching up to new highs to make true, which is what I will say. Most traders, when they get long a market, they don't have a thesis at all. They're buying a market, they're hopping on the elevator because it's going up. Very dangerous thing when you're running into overhead resistance, right? Now, certainly Intel could go higher. Certainly could have. I mean, I think there's overhead resistance up in here, and Intel certainly could have done any one of these things. But since it's not here, and it's closer to resistance, this is a put or a strip straddle. A strip straddle, by the way, is a 2-to-1 put to call ratio of at the money options. So it's a real thing. It's one of my favorite ways to play volatility. But the only thing that I want to do here is look for an opportunity to get short. By the way, right now Intel is trading at $46.50. And we'll see if it does stay down in this area, but it's sold off pretty sharply from the 49.80-ish 50 area, trading again at about $46.50 at the moment, which brings it down to this area down in here. Now, if you wanted to get long Intel, this is where you do it. This is where you do it. If you want to take profit, this is where you do it, up in this area. So even though there's earnings, you don't want to build a long position in a zone of resistance. And by the way, if you love the Intel narrative, this is a terrific opportunity. If you loved Intel up in this area, if we end up with a halfback or better retracement, and you believe in the narrative going forward, that's your buy. But this is where I think a lot of people were hoodwinked into buying semis. Everyone was talking about it. It's part of the reason the NASDAQ was so strong today. And we see what's happened in the wake. Now, Intel could climb up in the after hours, but just remember, think about where we are in relation to the setup. Not, hey, this could be a lottery scratch-off ticket if I buy a call, or let me get long because the market is up today. Bad idea, okay? Really bad idea. SMH was up today mostly because of Xilinx. Very low weighted, about 4% of the SMH. Just imagine what we're going to see in SMH tomorrow if Intel opens up down around $46.50. In fact, we should probably see this 95 print. We're probably sitting at about 93, I believe, 93 or $93.50 right now in the SMH. Don't buy these propulsion, when it looks like the rocket ship's taking off. The time to catch up with the rocket ship isn't as it's leaving the Earth's atmosphere. Either you're on the rocket ship already, or you're watching it go out into space and you'll wait for the next rocket ship. Right? I can't emphasize that enough. You can't catch up with the rocket ship, nor should you try. Okay? And that's what I think propelled the NASDAQ higher for so much of the day. And we'll go forward to see what this market actually starts to do as the Xilinx news is going to be unwound. Intel's probably going to be the new narrative, and it's probably going to drag this SMH back from over. There's 3 levels, by the way. SMH was overbought. And I know I'm spending a little bit more time on this in this free video, but I really want everyone to understand, if a market's heading higher, that should, and it's within the context of a trend, and you're thinking, well, I want to be long. Wait for a pullback, gang. I really should just say, this whole video could have been a whole lot less than 8 minutes if all I said is wait for a pullback. But I want to show you how the NASDAQ, SMH, Intel, Xilinx all created a certain reality the market bought into, literally and figuratively, and how dangerous that can be, especially when a heavily weighted name like Intel, both in the NASDAQ futures and the SMH, is trading up near resistance. The run into earnings had occurred. Now we're seeing the let off. Now we're seeing a bit of the disappointment. All right, gang. So I'll see you in the next update.